and you can just send it to me afterwards.
Deal.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to Thursday Tidbits. Thank you all for joining us. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. As always, please make sure that your microphone is muted the entire time until we're ready to have a discussion, or if you have a question, you're welcome to unmute. If you will also keep your camera off while the presenters are sharing their information, since we are recording, uploading this on YouTube. It just helps limit distractions if your camera is off. And so today we'll be talking about how we can help students create healthy habits around substances, alcohol, and drugs. And so we will be talking pretty in depth about addiction, drugs, alcohol. And so just a reminder for you all today, if you are struggling with addiction or substance use, please just remember that we have services here on campus. You get free counseling and support through the Employee Assistance Program. And if you need to, just take a step back from the conversation today. You're welcome to take a moment of deep breathing. We've given you some mindfulness tools to utilize, or you can just go ahead and log off the call if you need to. We've got some great guest speakers here with us today from the Center for Counseling and Wellbeing. We have Jeff Jones and Brandy Gibson, and I'll have them give a little bit more information about them and what they do. And then we've also got a student here with us, a peer health leader, Bethany Calhoun, and all three of them are going to share a bunch of really great information for you all today. In the chat box, you should be able to see the Qualtrics link, and as always, that's where you'll sign in and you'll get your credit from the Pedagogy Institute via that link. We've got a bunch of really great information for you all today, so I'm going to let our presenters go ahead and get started. We've got Jeff Jones up first. Thank you all for being here.
All right, well, thank you, Carly, and thank you everybody for being here and attending. What I hope to do today is just create a conversation. What I love about these opportunities is that we can just start a conversation in places where we wouldn't normally have them. And certainly about issues related to mental health, addiction, and well-being. Today we are going to talk about drugs and alcohol, and as the picture shows here, kind of a picture of what addiction to me feels like. We're going to talk about I'm going to talk mostly about how drugs may affect the brain, and I promise not to get too overwhelming in the science behind it. I try to do my best to keep it as simple as possible so we can all digest it. But there's some numbers that we're going to go over in these next two slides that are relevant. I think I'm not a big numbers guy, but I think the numbers are important in us understanding that this is a really prevalent issue. As most of us know, living in Oklahoma, we know that drugs and alcohol are a continuing problem that we're trying to address. So today we're going to go a little bit through some numbers. But before I get started, again, I'm a licensed professional counselor and licensed alcohol drug counselor. I'm actually an alum from UCO. I did my grad and undergrad program here before I went and worked in community mental health. There, I worked in areas like drug court and DUI court, and I didn't work for the court. I worked for the people in those systems. But we were confronting pretty hardcore addiction, and untreated mental health, and untreated trauma, which are all risk factors for addiction. So my passion today is just to get the conversation started and to share some facts, and for us to really see that there is something we can all do to help get the word out, get the education out, get the proper information out, and also help people around us deal with this addiction. Okay. So one of the things that I think is really important when we're getting started is that a lot of times college students would, whenever I'm getting up there, and I think everybody who's a teacher who's had to present to college students before, many college students will say, well, yeah, but that's not me. That's not me. I don't have a problem. I don't have those problems. So what I try to do, and the reason why I love brain science, is because we all have them. We all have them, so it's related to everybody. So this information today is just about the general information about brain science and addiction, which I hope is important to every college student, as our brain is our greatest asset in learning and being able to achieve what I hope is a life after college. Okay. So again, not going to go over all this. I'm not going to read slides to you if I can help it. But here we can see that it is continues to be a major problem on college campuses. We know that the college campus environment comes with a history of substance experimentation, substance use, and certainly misuse. We know that oftentimes too, students can feel sort of obligated to be a part of the culture of drugs and alcohol when they come to college. I know that I remember having some of those messages whenever I was a student. But so drug use, along with a whole host of other high-risk health issues, really fall on the traditional college student age the most. We know that 18 to 24-year-olds are the most at risk, and in terms of brain development, they're not done developing. So we know, and we're going to talk about the impacts of exposure before the brain is fully developed. One of the numbers that I think is just really, really important to me is that 1 in 4 of the nation's college students meet the criteria, the medical criteria for a substance abuse issue, which is, for me, there has to be a bigger explanation. There has to be a bigger explanation as to just risk factors, right? So oftentimes I get the question of, as an addiction counselor, I get the question of why would someone abuse drugs? Why would someone abuse alcohol? And for me, what I have experienced in my work is that these are 3 big areas that we have to look into. Childhood experiences, which can be trauma of any kind, of course, but also early exposure to drugs and alcohol. We know that the education and conversation around drugs and alcohol has an influence in somebody's experimentation or exposure to drugs and alcohol, and certainly their peer-to-peer influence. If they're in an environment where things are certainly normalized, it's not going to look like a problem. It's just going to look like a weekend, another day of the week. So we know that these are 3 very big issues. But I wanted to put the definition of what addiction is, just to put it shortly. And oftentimes the conversation I have with students who have questions about whether or not they feel like they may have an addiction. And by the way, it could be anything, right? So we know that the brain can and certainly will be addicted to just about anything. But I always like to ask students, well, if you're unsure, if you feel like you may have an addiction or you may feel addicted, is just to go without it and just to try to go any stretch of time without it. And usually that's pretty telling. But addiction, in this case, is considered the ongoing or dependence or reliance on a behavior despite its consequences. And just to put it simply, I continue to have adverse consequences, I continue to have problems, but I continue to use, or I feel like I can't use, or I feel like I can't stop from using. It is a chemical issue, and like I said, we're going to go into that. But what my big message is to students and to you guys today is that the brain, working on the reward circuit of the brain, reward circuit part of the brain, is just wired for addiction. What we find out is that, what we're going to talk about is how these chemical reactions really hijack natural processes that happen in the brain and really alter its function, and to the point where that chemical is hard to beat, if you will. And we'll again talk about that in a little bit more detail as we go along. But again, what many of us are going to be thinking about the question, like, how do I bring up the question? How do I approach students? Well, again, I just like to ask students to think about, when was the last time you went without it? What was the longest stretch of time you had before you felt like you had to have it again? And anything like that. Those are good questions just to get the conversation started, and having a student think about whether or not they may need some help with a particular addiction. Okay, so one of the things that I think is important is just kind of looking at some of the things that happen when people first start to use drugs and why it eventually becomes an addiction. The first use may be positive. First experiences, we know because it works on the reward circuit part of the brain, that it can pack a really powerful punch. A lot of rewarding learning chemicals, as we call them, dopamine and serotonin, are very learning chemicals. That's why dopamine and serotonin often are paired with typical enjoyable everyday activities like eating, working out, sleeping, all those things. But the first use may be positive. most cases, people believe that they're in control of it. This is always something interesting to me because we are talking about things that alter the brain or hijack function in the brain. But generally, most people feel in control of their use in some way that minimizes their perception of risk. Drugs can also become an antecedent to normal things. Now, this is probably the big dilemma that I face when I'm working with people who are coming off of substances, is that those typical activities without the drugs are far less rewarding, or feel far less rewarding on the brain and the body, which can make those things less rewarding to the point where I may stop doing them. Now, this could be any range of activities that are important for my well-being. But oftentimes, drugs or alcohol, these chemicals, become an antecedent. They get paired with these activities, whether it's probably the most popular one that I'm aware of in college is alcohol at social gatherings. And when we look in a broader scope of our country's culture, we know that that's really common. We see alcohol present in most of those situations, and it gets paired with those situations, again, as a reward, making the idea of doing those socializing without it much more difficult, or in a brain way, far less rewarding. I want to use the term hijacking of important function, that term hijacking, because that's essentially what these chemicals do. These chemicals come in and they hijack function. Where I normally have that reward circuit working, I have naturally producing reward chemicals in the brain. These substances take over, and they either decrease my body's sensitivity to it, or they decrease the number of those good chemicals, which results in me relying on the substance even more. We know no single factor alone determines whether or not someone can become addicted. We know that there's a whole host of things. We know that, again, early exposure to substances has the greatest impact. That's the thing that we try to, in a prevention education sense, try to get the message out about that. To the developing brain, early exposure is probably the biggest risk factor that we're going to face. But the higher number of risk factors greatly increase that person's risk. Now, it's not cause and effect. In talking about addiction, I never want to give the impression that I'm talking about cause and effect, because as we go through the risk factors here in a minute, I don't want anyone to assume like, oh, I have many risk factors, that must mean that I'm addicted or I'm going to be addicted. It just means that without intention or without care, I may become addicted far easier than other people. Now, protective factors, on the other hand, are the things that we try to build on. We try to make aware. And certainly at UCO and in our counseling center, we want to provide as many of those protective factors as we can. And that's community, connection, which we see as essential to the recovery process for somebody who has been dealing with addiction for most of their life. We know to reinsert them in a healthy community, rebuild connections, is actually going to heal the body and mind in a really significant way. Okay, so again, what are some of the risk factors that we want to look at? Aggressive behavior in childhood. Now, there's tons of explanations. I won't go into that today because we only have a little bit of time, and I feel like I'm already taking too much time. We have a lack of parental supervision. Again, that lack of social connection. When we see students that are heavily isolated, now we know that this is probably the risk factor for all mental health issues, is that lack of connection or increased isolation. And when you know it, in the 2020, this particular issue is really off the charts. And that's why we're seeing addiction and issues related to addiction skyrocket over the past years, because we're all asked to isolate and detach from our connections. Again, we're in a culture of experimentation. Kids are out on their own for the first time. They're exploring a lot of their independence, their own choices, and their exposure and access to certain things are going to make it more of a risk if they attach to an environment where they're finding connection, but they're also finding a regular use of substances. And then again, not having access to things like what I consider community poverty. When I don't have community, when I don't have connections, or I don't have any kind of safe base in my life, these are all pretty tremendous risk factors. Protective factors, we could see these obviously as just the flip of the ones that I just said. But what we try to do, obviously, through the counseling experience is just to reinsert somebody into a safe environment. A lot of students may feel like I don't have any choice, whether it's the pressure from my parents, my pressure from my financial situation. Maybe I'm a first-gen college student and this is all riding on me. It's all on me. Whatever the case may be, we want to give someone a safe environment where they can talk about these things, connect with other people who are going through the same thing. And we see that have a tremendous effect on somebody's willingness to try sobriety on. Okay. Now, again, just to emphasize this, because again, what we see in our data is that we see more younger and younger people getting exposed to substances at an earlier age. And there is nothing more dangerous to the brain in terms of having risk for addiction later on in life, especially in adulthood, as the early exposure. Let's see. Okay, so again, some drugs produce, I guess I'll just sum this up since for time's sake. So for the brain, the difference between normal rewards and drug rewards can be likened to the difference between somebody whispering in your ear versus shouting into a microphone. So when we think of kind of the learning chemicals, the teaching chemicals like dopamine and serotonin, when you get that shout of those chemicals, you're going to teach the body, you're going to teach the brain to seek that out. And that's why it's hard to readjust after prolonged use or abuse of a substance, because the body has to reset, and it does reset over time. There's no particular timeline on that reset. Everyone's different. Everyone's biology is a little bit different, but that is the comparison. So we think of our typical activities as that whisper, the things that we normally get rewards from is that whisper. Then the drugs come in and it's like a microphone, so it takes over on that level. So therefore, what we see is, so just as we turn the volume down on the radio that is too loud, the brain of someone who misuses drugs adjusts by producing fewer neurotransmitters in the reward circuit by reducing the number of receptors that can receive signals. Therefore, what we see in our classrooms and around campus is students that often feel flat, feel they've lost their motivation, they feel lifeless, obviously increased use or increased experimentation with substances, depression, and is unable to enjoy typically pleasurable things. But again, what we're trying to do in that process is teach the brain to enjoy those natural pleasurable things without the substance. And that's really what that sobriety phase is all about before we hit the recovery. And the recovery phase is all about understanding, why did I turn to drugs in the first place? What was I trying to fulfill? What was I trying to accomplish? What was I needing before I sought out drugs? Okay, just again, prevention is the best strategy. We want to intervene as early as possible. We're seeing early exposure happen is actually younger than this now. 10 to 12-year-old exposure to alcohol, now marijuana, a lot of other drugs too. So the prevention is our best strategy. Getting in early is going to be our best course of action. Okay, I'm going to pass the mic because I've obviously used too much time and we have other people who want to talk. I'm going to pass the microphone to Brandy now, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Brandy.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now too, hopefully. We will see. Yeah, maybe not. Okay. Well, my name is Brandy Gibson. I am a licensed alcohol and drug counselor just like Jeff, and I am also a marriage and family therapist. I've been in the field for about 16, 17 years now. Seems like much longer sometimes. And well, if I can, maybe not. I don't know. Here we go. Let me try this again. No. Okay. It does not want me to do that. So I'm just going to talk.
I can share for you.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll move forward because we have shortened time. I wanted to just talk really quick about how faculty and staff can possibly help a student and kind of what things to maybe look out for. What I've got are just a small list of some things that you may see in a student And I don't think that is still working, but anyway. We want to think about a student maybe who you've seen a decline possibly in some of their behaviors. Maybe they used to show up for class and very vibrant, lively, actively engaged in class, and maybe suddenly you've seen a change in the behavior. Maybe they are not attending as much as they were. Maybe they're sleeping through class. Sometimes we may see kind of a bizarre behavior or excessive lateness. Maybe there's even a change in their hygiene. So these are just some things that we may be looking for. Sometimes this happens. There could be other things too, but we always want to ask, right? We don't want to just assume. So I ask faculty and staff many times just to think about, how would you want to be approached, and think about how you would approach that student. Obviously, a faculty or staff member might even see something in their work, in the student's work, that may be concerning as well. And that might be a perfect time to start asking some questions. And so how would you do that? I would hope that the faculty or staff member might pull that student aside by themselves, maybe talk to them after class, or maybe set up an appointment, just to keep it, just so that it's private conversation. And again, just asking questions, because we don't want to assume, we don't want to think that something's happening and making that assumption. We don't want to belittle or maybe try and compare, just offer some help. I have told faculty before in the past, if you feel like there's an emergency, obviously, see if you can walk the student over to the counseling clinic, or pick up the phone together and make a phone call together. Sometimes a student is a little bit leery about making an appointment, a little bit nervous, and if they can have that added support, maybe offer some suggestions and go with them, or just make that phone call together, hand the phone over to the student, because we're going to need to talk to the student. There's also off-campus resources. And then one of the great things we have here is a Smart Recovery group, which Jeff leads. Smart Recovery. There's also AA off campus. There's so many different resources. There's NA. We just want to help get the student to the right resource for them. So AA may not be for everybody. Maybe Smart Recovery is a much better solution for that individual, that student. Also for faculty and staff, there's the BAT. The BAT is a wonderful place to refer a student to if you have a concern about their behavior. Maybe they've made a suggestion or a remark in class or in a paper. That BAT can go straight to us, and then our director can make a decision as to how they're going to approach the student. And that's just another way of just reporting if maybe that faculty or staff member doesn't want to actually interject and talk to the student directly. All of this aside, I mean, our number is pretty easy to remember. It's 974-2215. We're in the 4th floor of the Nye building. Right now, everything is online, but you can reach us through email. You can reach us through the website. You can reach us through the phone. There's a whole lot of different options. And again, don't forget about the options, the resources here on campus that are available to all of our students. And with that, I think I may turn it back over to Jeff if you want to talk about some of the meeting stuff, or if you want to, if Bethany wants to speak a little bit as well too.
Hi, my name is Bethany Calhoun. I am a senior here at UCO, and I'm the president of Peer Health Leaders. So since we're a bit short on time, I'll just give you a quick overview of what Peer Health Leaders is and what we do on campus. So Peer Health Leaders is a student organization. We're part of health promotion. And so students apply to be peer health leaders. It's kind of like a peer mentorship and education program. So we have 3 committees: mental health and well-being, interpersonal violence, and substance and alcohol use prevention. And so the peer health leaders within those committees work together to create education focused towards their peers that's evidence-based and non-biased, so that their peers feel comfortable interacting with that information. So our information that we are giving to them is, obviously, it's very important. These are pertinent issues. We really want our students to feel comfortable with this information, especially when it comes to substance use, because we know that a lot of college students, we do have some students who are coming to campus with already occurring substance use issues, but a lot of college students, when they come to college, that is when their substance use begins. So this is a really critical time for education and intervention for them. So as peer leaders, we have both educational programs that we put on, and we also have presentations that we give. And as faculty, you can request us to give presentations on substance use and on other topics. So we have a Bronco Buzz and another presentation over a buzz over substances. And then we have an alcohol and a marijuana Jeopardy. These are like really fun interactive presentations where it's just like a fun Jeopardy style where students try to guess the answer to different questions about substance and alcohol use facts. They learn a lot. It's a lot of fun. We have other fun programs like Cannabis Conversations, which is really fun now that we have, or which is really relevant now that we have medical marijuana here in Oklahoma. So that's become pretty important and pretty popular with students, those conversations. And then we also have two big programs that we put out, Fall Fest in the fall and Safe Spring Break in the spring. And these are programs that they're just big one-day, couple-hour events where we discuss safe alcohol use, drinking and driving prevention, and then sexual assault with our students. So they're kind of before that semester's break. We really want students to be prepared if they're going to be drinking, if they're going to be on or off campus. We want them to be prepared to make safe choices. We also do have one program coming up. It's a marijuana Jeopardy next Tuesday. It's virtual. A lot of our programming now is virtual because of COVID, but we're also doing in-person presentations if you request. So you can request either by like emailing Carly or by going to the CCWB website, and there's a link there to request. So feel free to reach out to peer health leaders if you want to do like extra credit, or if you have other ideas for educational programming that you feel your students need. And I will hand it back to Jeff or Brandy because it sounds like they have more to talk about.
Yeah, again, I just want to thank everybody for, I know this is fast and furious. This is my first tidbits, so there's a lot of information, and certainly talking about something as complex as substance abuse, there's tremendous amounts of information. Again, I just want to encourage anybody who has more questions to reach out to us for any consulting purposes, or if you have any questions about the resources that we utilize. I'm also a Smart Recovery facilitator, and I host our Smart Recovery meeting. We're virtual like the rest of the world, but we have that on Tuesdays from 12 to 1. And there's other smart meetings that are available through smartrecovery.com. Students can find online meetings. They can find forums, blogs, resources, strategies for staying sober, strategies for getting help, and plenty of education on addiction. So thank you guys again. I'm going to pass it back to Carly and let her wrap us up.
All right, thank you all so much. That was really great, informative for us today. Does anyone, before we log off, have any questions for experts here today? You can unmute your microphone or put it in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds to do so. All right, we're getting some comments. Thank you for the information. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I put our information or Health Promotions email in the chat box. So if you have additional information or want to get in contact with Brandy or Jeff, I'm happy to connect you with them. Again, you can always call 974-2215. Yeah, looks like we're good. I'm just checking the chat box for last minute things. I wonder if there's a good place for just layman's about what it looks like. Okay, cool. Well, if you need anything, thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we won't be having Thursday Tidbits next week. Obviously, we'll be on a little bit of a break, so I hope you all do something great for you. Bye, everyone.